In year 2003, the organization where I worked in published a book, Professional Kitchen of a Trainer. And during the same year, there was a festival of non-formal education, and I was one of the experts invited to participate in a panel discussion. My speech was about the division of the role of the trainer and the facilitator. The interesting thing is that my speech provoked a very hot discussion about this topic. And at the end of the discussion, participants came to the conclusion that we should not divide the role of a facilitator and a trainer, that during one method, during one session, educator can switch role easily from being a trainer to being a facilitator, just because the situation changed or the overall target can change a little bit. And our Swedish colleagues who were presenting silently at this discussion at that time told, okay, now we will go back to Sweden and we will present your book to our professional community. So at the moment of the presentation, what should I tell them? Is it the book is for whom? Is it the book for trainers or for facilitators? And then the audience laughed. So of course it was a long time ago. It was only 2003. And at that period of time, even international community of educators were slightly dividing these roles, and there were a lot of different discussions. There was no professional facilitator, and facilitation as an absolutely standing alone process was not very popular. But now, today, we can honestly say that training and facilitation are two different processes. Trainer and a facilitator are two different roles, and facilitation and training have different methods and techniques. Organizations and companies invite trainers and facilitators for different purposes. Trainers to teach participants something new, and facilitators to help find the right way to achieve right goals by the participants, the goals that they created for themselves. So training is aimed at the development of knowledge, certain skills or competences in general. And the role of the trainer is to develop a competency or a set of skills among participants. And the trainer is often an expert in the field he's teaching. Facilitation is the act of engaging participants in the creating, discovering, and applying learning insights. Facilitator is a person who helps a group of people to work together better, understand their common objectives, and plan how to achieve their objectives during meetings or discussions. And a facilitator often stays neutral to the whole process, and he must not be expert in the topic. So he is an expert not in the topic, not in the field. He's an expert in creation, the right discussion, organizing a right discussion when participants can learn from each other, sometimes from facilitator as well, but mostly from each other. And by learning from each other, reach their educational goals. The idea that educators should function as facilitators of learning is traditionally linked to a field of humanistic psychology and to Carl Rogers. According to Rogers, there are only two types of learning. The first type involves mainly our mind. It's very intellectual learning. It does not involve your feelings or your personality. And the second type of learning is significant, meaningful for you personally. and it is self-initiated when comprehension comes from within. So this type of learning is very much linked to your intrinsic motivation. When we discover something meaningful for ourselves, we incorporate our thoughts, our feelings and emotions by being personally involved in the learning event. And Carl Rogers developed the humanist concept of the facilitator as a catalyst, one who uses skilled questioning techniques to help learners draw their own conclusions from their personal experience and create their own prescription for change. Facilitation is especially appropriate in groups where your trainees and your participants already possess substantial expertise. And of course, adults possess their expertise. And if you compare facilitation in groups of youth and groups of adults, so in adult education, in adult audience, facilitation will be much more useful and is actually very important to use. But as an educator, you also need to divide the situations where you need to instruct and where you need to be a trainer or where you need to be a facilitator. For example, you lead some courses where you teach your participants to do something completely new, like piloting a small jet or jumping with a parachute or driving a car or creating jewelries and earrings by their own hands, and your audience doesn't have any experience in this field and any competences. In this case, of course, you need to be an instructor and a trainer because your audience doesn't have competences, doesn't have experience. And even if you organize perfect discussion, I very much doubt that they will be able to learn from each other how to pilot a small jet. But you may also have an aim to teach learners doing something completely, not a completely new, but something better than before. For example, you lead cooking courses concentrated on Asian cooking traditions, or you're a doctor and you developed a new approach to deal with a certain disease. And your audience are also doctors, and they already have experience of curing this disease, but maybe a different one. Or your learners are cookers, or even if not, they have experience of cooking because they probably cooked something for their spouses or for their children. So in this case, you can use facilitation as approach and facilitation methods and techniques to create the learning environment where your participants will learn something from you, but also a lot from each other. And this environment and this learning from each other will help them to create, will help them to reach their learning goal. So now we know how to distinguish between training and facilitation. We need to distinguish between facilitation methods and facilitation techniques. It's also two different things. And to explain you the difference, I would like to use experience proposed by Barbara McKay. She is a professional facilitator and she is a member of International Association of Facilitators. And in her blog, she gives such an interesting example. Like, imagine that your living room table has been through 25 years of heavy use, and it's time to give it a new look. So now you have two ways of doing it. The first one, repaint the table using just two tools, a glue of paint and a paintbrush. So professional painters may call this slightly amateur way of painting, leading to a poor quality result. Or you can use another way, like refinish the table using several steps: sanding, priming, painting, and sealing. And at the end, the quality will be a beautiful finish. Technique, a facilitation technique, we can link to the first way of repainting the table. Well, when you just have a gallon of paint and a paintbrush. So technique is a tool or a distinct standalone activity that can be used in a variety of different scenarios, but it is a small and standalone activity. And usually it doesn't lead, if you use it alone, it doesn't lead to a good result. For example, the primary tool for dialogue is question. A single question or even multiple questions do not lead to a finished product. So you need to mix them with something else. A tool on its own, the same, rarely leads to a polished result. And the method is a series of activities or steps, often sequenced in a particular order for maximum effect. And you can take out a step from the method or a technique from the method and use it separately on its own. So a method is a complex, it's a sequenced techniques or sequence steps, sequence tools. And the sequence bring you to a very beautiful, polished result. Methods designed to lead to a polished result. So let's look at examples of facilitation methods. Now, the first example is a focused conversation method, which was created by the Institute of Cultural Affairs and helps people to reflect on different issues, from interesting movie to last office blow up, or to how to create better widgets, hamburgers, or tractors. It is a relatively simple process that enables a conversation to flow from surface to depth. And a facilitator leads the conversation through a series of questions at 4 levels. These levels represent exactly how our brain processes the information. An experiential learning cycle created by David Cole is a theoretical basement for this method. So it is a method, it's not a technique of a facilitation, because of the 3 main reasons. And the first reason is that it has steps. And it is important that these steps occur in a particular order, which means that if you mix them up, the group will have big difficulties to reach their learning goal. The second reason, it is a structure used to facilitate a dialogue, but at the same time, it is an underlying structure for the entire agenda of the educational event, like conference, training, or a workshop. And the third reason is that each part of the method can be used as a standalone piece, so which means that you can extract one of the steps of the focused conversation and use it as a small tool during your educational course or your workshop. Let us look at the example of using focused conversation for game debriefing. Imagine that you just have finished a very complicated simulation game. There were a lot of feelings, a lot of challenges, critical and complex situations, and now your participants they have like an entire mess in their mind because they confuse the attitudes to people as participants from this group and to characters they played in this game, or they confuse feelings and emotion they have towards people as characters in the game and people as participants of this game. So the facilitator, educator, you need to lead a conversation which will allow the group to slightly clear up the air about what was going on in this game, what they felt, separate actions from feelings, roles from people, to understand clearly what does this experience mean to them and what kind of insight that they got during this game they can transfer to their real life situation. And if you use focused conversation as a debriefing method, then you will ask your group a sequence of questions. Like you will lead the focus conversation in 4 steps. You will begin with asking the group questions around the data, facts, and external reality. Like, what did you actually see, hear, read, or experience during this game? What kind of challenges did you face? How did you react to these challenges? And when you talk about the reaction, you should talk about not emotions, but actual reaction in actions. So what did you do? What kind of situation happened? What each of the participants did? How did you behave as a group? When you finished with these questions, you can come to the second stage, and now you will ask group questions that are gathered around feelings and emotions. So you can ask them, what was your gut level reaction? What 5 feelings or emotions you experienced during this game? Or what kind of emotional experience you had in general? What does it mean to you? What does this emotion tell you? When you finished with emotion, then you draw out meaning, values, significance, implications. So you can ask group questions like, what new insights did you get from this? Why generally happened what happened? So why did you choose this particular way of action when you had a variety of choices, the variety of possibilities? So what does it mean to you? What does it tell you about yourself? What does it tell you about the group? What does it tell you about the situation? So you interpret everything that happened according to the values of the group, values of concrete personalities, values of concrete people. And then you need to bring the conversation to close, making resolution and enabling the group to make their own decision about the future. So what do you think we should do with all this experience? What kind of insights you are ready to transfer from this game experience to reality? This elegant method has helped millions of people around the world. The method has given people a way to share their common concerns and experiences in depth, rather than reacting with negative criticism. It has resolved conflicts between people because the sequence of questions that I described to you also is used in conflict resolution, and then these questions are asked people who are in conflict. But focused conversation can also be used as a framework for educational events. For example, you want to organize an ecological conference about the particular ecological disaster or situation in a city, in a region, or in a country, or globally. So in this case, you will have to divide your day or your event into 4 equal parts and begin with a presentation of experience using a lecture, storytelling session, video, or role-playing game or simulation game. And after that, the group can share what they know about the topic. Are there any statistics about that, facts, and other data? The most important thing here on this stage, you should make all the discussion, you should circle all the discussion around facts, around the data, using questions related to the stage of the focused conversation. So you should not go deeper, you should not go to emotions, you should not go to ways to solve the problem. It is not just a presentation on the stage. It is not just a presentation of the experience. It is already a discussion about the experience. When we look at it and talk what we see and what we know about that. So after discussing facts, you should discuss feelings, the experience connected with the topic. And on the stage of the interpretation, you discuss why all these things happen. what they press us to understand, what options we can find to solve these issues or change the situation. And at the last stage, it is time for discussing plans for the future, which are connected to the topic. So you can make individual round of thoughts and then the group discussion. And what is important about the focused conversation, why it is popular basement for or a framework for educational events, it makes people discuss things going slightly from surface to depth, and at the same time, focused conversation keep them at one page. So they all at one wave, or wherever you call it. At ordinary conferences, usually people discuss things separately in parallel sections. One section or one workshop can discuss facts and data. Another one already discussed what we can do with this problem, what options to solve the problem we have. And when people, after all these workshops and parallel sessions, come together again, they are on different level of understanding of the problem. So it's quite difficult to make the all conclusion that will satisfy all the people. And some people will probably disagree, some even don't understand why we take this conclusion, because we discuss something completely different in our section. And focused conversation leads people to go all together through 4 stages. So when you gather them at the last session of your event, they all understand it at the same point, from the same point of view, from the same level, which is really valuable. The high level of participation and action generated by such focused discussions have a dramatic impact on the participants of conferences. And often they learn more from the discussion with their peers and their colleagues than they ever could get from a speaker. Another example of a facilitation method is 6 thinking hats. This method was created by Dr. Edward de Bono. And it is considered to be a method because it is composed of 6 distinct thinking modes, which can be used in any sequence. 6 thinking hats can help you to look at a problem from different perspectives, but one at a time, to avoid confusion from too many perspectives crowding in your mind at the same time. And each thinking hat is a different style of thinking. So let's take an imaginary example. Like you're working in a secondary high school, and currently the dropout rate of your school is dramatically increasing. And you, together with your colleagues from the school and from the administration, came up together to discuss this problem using 6 thinking hats. So each time when you change the thinking hat, you will focus on different aspects of a problem. When you put on imaginary white hat, you will discuss and focus on data, facts, and information. Information which you already know, or information which you just need to know. And you will deal with questions like, what is the current high school dropout rate in our community? How does the rate in our community compare to the national data? What specific programs are currently in place? When you finished with data, you will change an imaginary hat. So you will take off a white hat and you will put on a black hat. When all of you are sitting in imaginary black hats, you will focus on difficulties, potential problems, why something may not work. And you will deal with questions and issues like what issues contribute to the dropout rate? What are obstacles to improvement? What mistakes do we need to avoid? When you change a hat to a red one, You will focus on feelings, hunches, gut instincts, and intuition. And you will focus on questions like, do you have any emotions about the situation? Or put yourself in the shoes of a high school student considering dropping out. And imagine your fears and concerns. And when you change the hat to a yellow one, then you will focus on values and benefits, why something may work. When you change the hat to a green one, then you will start discussing creative approaches to solve a problem. And you will deal with questions like, what's a new approach? If we reduce the dropout rate by 25%, how could that impact our community? And the blue hat focuses on processes, control, timing, next steps, action plans. So it's dealing with questions like, what's the next logical step? Who needs to be included? In this example, we were talking about using these thinking hats in a sequence, like a group of people just put on and putting off imaginary hats focuses on different aspects of the problem, but these aspects follow one by one. Let's look at the example of using 6 thinking hats in a real situation for school teachers. And this method will be used in a different approach. So there was a case described by the educator from Luxembourg when teachers from 5 schools decided to use this method to discuss the realities of being a school manager. Each participant chose a hat and looked at the reality from the different viewpoint. The facilitator intervened only when the viewpoint was not respected. So in this case, all the group of teachers were divided into subgroups according to 6 thinking hats. Each one of them just decided for himself with which hat, with which aspect of the problem he would like to work with. So those who worked with white hat came, and they were working with facts actually, they came up with ideas like, okay, if I stay a manager, then I will have to stay at school for long hours because it's a full-time job. Or I will not earn more and I will be the main responsible person at the school. Those people who worked in a green hat and they were exploring creative approaches to the situation of a school manager came up with ideas like, I will try to make the school more inclusive by encouraging innovative ideas. Rather than checking everything at the school manager, I will try to create a self-regulating organization. The subgroup, which were working with the yellow hat and were talking about the benefits, came up with ideas like, I can affect many children and teachers in a positive way. I can implement innovative ideas at school. I can improve myself and my institution. The subgroup that were working in a black hat came up with an idea like being a school manager is like a bed of nails. You have too many responsibilities, but not have much power and not much authority. The red hat representatives were talking like, there were teachers with whom I get on well and others with whom I do not get well. So if I am a school manager, will I be able to be objective in all the aspects? And the blue hat ensured that 6 thinking hats guidelines have been observed. Participants liked the activity and found it very useful to stay focused during the discussion. They thought that the activity was very simple and they found it very useful to look at the reality from many aspects. So now we took 2 examples how to use this method separately. And now let's look at the example of using 6 thinking hats as a framework for educational events. Remember, when we were talking about the focus conversation, we took it as an example the implementation of the ecological conference. If we have an ecological disaster happened in a particular district or a region, and we want to discuss it, So if we take the same problem and the same conference, it will look a little bit different if we use 6 thinking hats. On the first step of the conference, the participants or experts will present the facts of the case because they will use white hat. After presenting the case and facts and statistics, they will change the hat to a green one and will try to discuss, maybe in subgroups, maybe all together, ideas on how this case could be handled. After that, they will evaluate the merits of the ideas and will list the benefits using the yellow hat and list of drawbacks using black hat. After that, they can get everyone's good feeling about the alternative using the red hat and summarize the conference and the meeting using the blue hat. So now we examined with you 2 methods of facilitation, but there are many more, of course. And about each method, I can give you a separate workshop for half of the day or a day or sometimes 3 days. At the moment, it's not our aim to dig deep into every method. The aim is to understand what is a method of facilitation and what possibilities it gives. Here is a list of other facilitation methods I advise you to learn using a self-directed approach because information about this method can be easily found on the internet. Some of them, like World Cafe, Open Space, Appreciative Inquiry, even have separate international communities gathered around this method. You can find really a lot of materials about them. I also recommend you to search for dynamic facilitation, future search, search conference, real-time strategic change, workout, lean coffee, and treasure hunt. For more resources on methods of facilitation, you can visit the site of International Association of Facilitators. So let's summarize. Methods of facilitation are complex and consist of sequence of steps or tools or techniques. Used in a logic, the steps can lead to sufficient educational results. If you work with learners who already have experience in the field and your educational goal is to teach them to do something better, then facilitation methods are the best choice. They allow you to work with facts, statistics, stories, and cases relying on participants' experience. You will get a better result using the methods of facilitation than using separate techniques or instructional approach. So I want to remind you what is a facilitation tool or facilitation technique. It's a distinct stand-alone activity that can be used in a variety of different scenarios. There is a variety of facilitation tools. Let's take a brief acquaintance with the most spread. I think that one of the most widespread is a brainstorming. I'm sure you heard about that. So it is a quick way of collecting participants' ideas, views, and suggestions in an open way. And it's a very useful tool when you need to find good solutions for a problem or to look at the problem from different perspectives. The most important principle of the brainstorming, which needs to be emphasized by the facilitator all the time, is that there is no right or wrong contribution. So in adult audience, facilitators should not let anyone dominate. It can happen, especially in those groups that have been studying together for a long time, or if group members belong to the same organization. In this case, usually all the roles in group are already distributed, and the group has leaders, formal and informal. And in this case, people will look at the ideas of leaders more preciously. So they will value these ideas more and will try to emphasize this idea. So you as a facilitator has a challenging point to softly slow down this process or to cut this process and not to let any idea to dominate. So it's a challenge. It is important to ensure that contributions are treated equally. They should not be criticized, they should not be evaluated or censored. Brainstorming has several steps. The first steps can be called preparatory steps. So you need to specify a topic or a goal to the group, and you can make it in advance so that people would already think about this problem before they come to a common meeting. On the second stage, you need to ask for free-for-all generation of ideas from among members of the group. So there is a problem or question written on the flip chart, and you're just asking people, please give your ideas how to solve this problem. You need to write down all the ideas that people give you and list them on the flip chart, holding back any reactions or discussions from any members of the group until all the ideas are collected. So in the process, nobody can criticize or comment. Only participants can ask clarifying small questions if they don't really understand the essence of the idea or they didn't hear it well. On the next step, you should combine the ideas or cluster them to common categories. And only on the final stage, you will work in, your work will include some critiques and some more deep discussion of the ideas, because you will select the most preferred categories or ideas. This can be done by using the discussion voting, like ranking or rating, and consensus techniques. The next one is panel discussion. So I hope you remember I gave you already an example of the panel discussion where I was an expert, and I gave a speech on the division of the roles of the facilitator and the trainer at the Festival of Non-Formal Education in Minsk. So in this format of the discussion, there are some selected participants. Sometimes they are external experts. They form a panel. And this panel starts the discussion on certain topics. There can be an overall topic for discussion, and panelists can just give their own opinions on the topic, or their task is to give different points of view, or points of view from different angles. After the panelists, they are called panelists, finish to present their points of view, they are given time to react on the points of view of each other. And after that, all the other audience can join the discussion. So people can ask questions or give comments about the presented points of view, give feedback to panelists. Panel discussions are very useful for adult audience because they use experience of all people in the room and give place for every opinion. And slightly during this discussion, everyone in the room becomes an expert. Another example of a facilitation method of facilitation tool or technique is a fishbowl. Fishbowl is perfect for groups of people who are experienced in the topic, who want to say a lot. And this method allows facilitator or educator to structure the process of discussion so that people will not argue and with each other and could talk about the topic without any conflict. So for fishbowl, you have to organize your audience into two circles: the outer circle, which will be a large one, and the inner circle. If you have about 25 people in your room, so then the inner circle will be 4 or 5 people, and the rest will form the outer circle. So by the rules of fishbowl or fishpool, sometimes it's called fishpool, the outer circle should remain silent during the discussion, and only those people who are in the inner circle are allowed to speak. Two of them, if there are four chairs inside in the circle, two of them are always engaged in the discussions. Two chairs are always occupied by two volunteers. These two persons will be totally engaged and involved in the discussion during the whole time while the discussion is going. And two places are free. So in any time of the discussion, when somebody from the outer circle feels like he wants to say something and he may contribute, he just goes from outer circle, takes the chair and starts the conversation and arguments with those who are volunteering there, with those two people. So most of the time, these four chairs will be occupied by two always, two partly. And when the person who came from the outer circle feels like, okay, I have enough, I said everything that I wanted already, I got the feedback, I have nothing to say, he just stands up and goes back to the outer circle and leaves a chair free for anyone else from the outer circle again. So time after time, these chairs are switched and the people are coming and going, and they can contribute and go back to the silent position. And it really helps the educator, especially if you're not very experienced, or especially if you like to control the audience, really to control. And this tool gives possibility for really great discussions. The one tip is that you can display new questions for discussion or new statements every 10 minutes, new statements. And it works really better than if you have one statement for half an hour discussion, because people, it can happen that people feel like, okay, I said everything that I wanted. I don't know what to say, but I have to say something because we still have 15 minutes for this boring discussion. So when you display questions every 10 minutes, make an intrigue and create an intrigue, and people always stay engaged. So I really recommend you to use this tool for adult audience. It's very effective. The next example is a case study. In a case study, the facilitator presents a real life situation or invented scenario to the group by telling a story, showing pictures, or describing a story at the paper. The participants will then be asked to address the challenges, problems, or dilemmas outlined in the case study. This is a useful tool to relate the topic of the training session to a real-life situation, which encourages participants to develop more concrete ideas. The next example is also very interesting. It's called images or image codes, which are pictures, photos, short stories. They can be used as a code in order to present a challenge or a problem that needs to be solved, like the one you see on the slide now. A code is a way of communicating a problem briefly and clearly to the group, which allow them to reflect and examine it in order to gain new information and skills. The participants may, for example, be confronted with a picture or short story and then be asked what they see in the picture or what they heard in the story, what it means to them, and what their ideas are regarding the problem or challenge described. So the facilitator will initially not provide further details or additional information, and rather let the participants explore what they get out of the code. And that's why it is very useful tool for adult audience, because they have experience, they already have stories, they have so much information to explore, to get feedback about the picture called. With the youth audience, it doesn't work that much. So look at the picture at the slide once again. What kind of story you can come up with when you look at this picture? What happened there? What happened here? Who are main actors of the story? What problems does this picture represent? What is your connection to this problem? Another example of the facilitation tool is card clustering. It is a useful tool to structure discussions and brainstorming exercises. Participants are asked to write their thoughts and ideas on cards, which are then collected and presented by putting them on the wall or on a flip chart or just to the floor. The tool can take different rounds. For example, in the first round, it can be a brainstorming of ideas. The ideas are caught by cards, which is simply collected, read out, and put on the wall. In subsequent rounds, the contributions can be discussed, further elaborated, and grouped into 13 categories. The tool can be very effective and time efficient, so the participants have to stick to the most important points and express themselves through catchwords or short statements on the cards. It is important that the facilitator, educator, instruct the participants to write clearly, use few words, and only put one idea on each card. Since the tool requires materials and facility where the cards can be displayed, it may not be applicable in every room. So you will have to be very careful about the place where you have your workshop or educational event. And the last example is a round-robin technique. It is also a staged process, and on the first stage, educator clarifies the topic or goal to be addressed by the group. For example, to generate ideas to some particular problem. Members get some quiet period. They think on their own before the group meeting, or early in the group meeting, they have some time to identify ideas on their own. In the meeting, the facilitator collects a list of ideas by getting one idea from one person at a time, going around the table until all members have shared all of the ideas from their list. So they not just give him ideas, they have to pronounce ideas. Members do not analyze or discuss any of the ideas until all of them have been collected. So this method reminds of brainstorming. In brainstorming, they chaotically express ideas one by one, and here the facilitator goes around the table asking the person to give the card and also to pronounce the idea. And there is no critique, no evaluation. Members just can ask a question during the round robin only to get clarification, the same as in brainstorming on a suggested idea. And the facilitator and members avoid duplication of ideas on the list. So if somebody already expressed this idea, so you can't give the same idea, you have to find a new one. And when you have all the ideas collected, you may cluster them and choose the better ones. These are only several examples of facilitating techniques. More ideas about that you can find in following books.